Hi everyone and welcome to episode 3 of this reading vlog. It cannot end until I complete my TBR game. This is a series that I started last summer, filmed 2 episodes and then got busy and never got round to continuing, but we're doing that now. I am really in the mood to mood read right now, except I'm terrible at mood reading. So instead I'm going to use my TBR game, we're going to move around the board and I'm going to choose books as we go. I have already done the first roll, so I'm going to insert that footage now and then I will come back and tell you what I decided to pick up for that first roll. The lighting in this clip is probably going to be terrible, but let's see what I'm going to be reading first for this vlog. It's a 2-1-2, which is thriller or horror. So we landed on thriller, which was perfect because I recently read Catherine Ryan Howard's newest release and really enjoyed it. I love Catherine Ryan Howard's writing and I keep meaning to go back and try some of her backlist. So I decided to start the audiobook for The Liar's Girl, which I believe came out in 2018 or 2019. It was before The Nothing Man, which is the first book that I read by her. I'm about 30% of the way into this so far and I'm really intrigued. It does feel like a lot of thrillers that came out around that time, except I do really like Catherine Ryan Howard's writing. We're following this main character who I think is around the age of 30. However, 10 years ago she was at college in Dublin when her boyfriend was arrested and convicted of being a serial killer. She moved away to the Netherlands and has lived there ever since and tried to put it behind her. In the present day, it seems like a copycat killer has come out of the woodwork. However, her ex claims to have information that might help. But the only person that he'll talk to is her, and so she travels back to Ireland to help the police investigate. We have 2 timelines, one in the present day and one in the past, and I am really liking the past timeline because it feels very nostalgic. The main character was at uni or college around the same time that I was at uni. I don't know how predictable this is going to be because already I have some theories on stuff, but we will see. So far, I'm really liking the audiobook. It has, I believe, 2 narrators. It might be more than that, but we have a narrator for the main character, and then we also have this male narrator who is narrating what seems to be the killer, and those parts are really creepy. It is very, very unsettling, and there is this great atmosphere, so enjoying this so far. I'm going to pop out on my lunch break now to grab some lunch and I'm probably going to listen to some more. Then I will catch up with you maybe once I've finished it, unless I have something that I want to say once I'm around the halfway point. I have had a really stressful morning and I'm going to tell you about it even though no one probably cares. But basically I was meant to work from the office today. You can probably tell I'm not in the office, I'm working from home because I got into my car and a warning light came up on the dashboard saying that I needed to check my tyres pressure. Tyre pressure? The pressure of my tyres? Not sure on the right way to say that, but basically I stopped off at the petrol station on the way to work, used the little air machine thingy, which either the air machine wasn't working or my tyres were messed up. I now think it was the air machine. For some reason it was just saying the wrong number. No matter how I was trying to program it, it just didn't seem to want to work. So I didn't want to risk driving just in case there was something wrong. I took it to the garage instead and they sorted it for me. Hopefully that means it's all okay. I do have to do quite a long drive at the weekend. It's not that long, it's like an hour, but I'm taking my mum out with my sister for Mother's Day. Hopefully my car will be okay for that. I don't even drive it that often. This is why I get really wound up when something goes wrong with my car, because I hate spending money on it. I drive it probably once or twice a week, and given the choice I would just not drive at all because I find it really stressful. But anyway, I was also really disappointed this morning because I was meant to finish my audiobook on the way to and from work. I'm about 80% of the way through, so I think I've only got an hour or 2 left on the audiobook. It's really difficult to judge because I'm listening on 1.5 times speed, but I think I can finish this today. So I'm gonna go for a long walk after work, I think, just because I'm really enjoying this audiobook. This is how I know I'm listening to a good audiobook, because I keep trying to find excuses to listen to it, and like this morning I was genuinely so disappointed that I couldn't listen to this on my commute to work. It's interesting because when you hear the synopsis and when you look at the front cover, you might make the assumption that this is just another generic psychological thriller. However, I think it's really well written. It's very much keeping you inside the main character's mind and showing her thoughts and feelings and how she's still processing what happened 10 years ago, she can't believe that she was in love with this guy who turned out to be convicted of being a murderer. There is a mystery surrounding what happened back then, and obviously the links to what's happening in the present day. I don't know how this is going to resolve, but I am very, very curious to find out. Also, I'm really enjoying the past timeline that I think is set in the year 2007, around that time. It feels so nostalgic, and there was a part where they mentioned a traffic light ball or something like that. Traffic light parties, I completely forgot about. I went to a traffic light party when I was at uni. I don't even know if they're still a thing. It's just the little details like that are taking me back to being 18 and living away from home for the first time. So yeah, this is going well. It's feeling like a 4 stars. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with it. I think it all depends on how it wraps up, but it could end up being a 4.5 stars. I don't think it's going to be my favourite Catherine Ryan Howard, just because some of her other books have been so unique. But if you are looking for a well-written psychological crime mystery, then would recommend it. I'm really hesitant to call it a thriller because so far it hasn't been that thrilling. So I have finished reading The Liar's Girl by Catherine Ryan Howard, and while this isn't my favourite Catherine Ryan Howard book, I am going to give it a solid 4 stars. It was definitely worth reading. It actually reminds me the most of The Trap. Out of all of her books, it reminds me the most of The Trap, which is my favourite Catherine Ryan Howard book. I think her last 3 releases, I've read 6 of her books so far, and her last 3 releases are my top 3. The Trap has this incredible slow build-up with so much tension, and the ending, in my opinion, is really intense and memorable. I think The Liar's Game has that same slow build-up. However, there were parts in the middle where I was a little bit bored, and I understand. I think the author was trying to throw in some red herrings and that kind of thing, but for me, it ended up feeling a little bit pointless by the end of the book. It felt repetitive, so that is the main reason why it's not 5 stars, because it did drag a little bit in the middle. However, I would recommend it. Like I said, I'm really glad that I read it, and it has made me more excited to read. I think I've got 2 more of Catherine Ryan Howard's backlist to try. I really want to do a video where I rank all of her books, so I only have 2 more books left. I always worry with reading backlist titles by authors that I love that they're not going to live up as high in my expectations, or that I'm not going to enjoy them as much as their newer releases. However, I liked this. I think if I'd read it in 2018 when it came out, then it still would have been a 4 stars. So that is the first roll done for this reading vlog. I'm now going to cut to roll number 2, which I actually did at the same time as roll number 1. Basically, I was thinking that I might read a physical book and an audio book. I didn't end up doing that, so I haven't yet started a book for roll number 2. I am going to insert that footage now, and then I will pop back in and tell you what I've decided to read. Roll number 2 is a 5, nice high number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is challenge, and the challenge is, to read an underhyped book. So we landed on challenge, and the challenge was to read an underhyped book, which turned out to be a lot trickier than I was expecting. A lot of the books on my radar right now are quite popular, so they don't really fit for this prompt. However, I was looking through the books that I have saved on BookBeat, and I came across Experienced by Kate Young, which came out last year, and it only has a few thousand ratings. However, I think this sounds really intriguing. I cannot remember where I heard about this book. I think I might have been scrolling through Goodreads, seen the cover at some point and thought, oh, that looks pretty, and then I looked into it and it sounded like something that I would enjoy. So this, I can't work out if it's contemporary fiction or if it's a romance. It's described as a rom-com, so it could be either, but basically we're following a main character. She came out later in life, and her girlfriend has turned around to her and said, I think we need to take a break for a few months so you can go out and experience dating as a queer woman. And I think it's about the trials and tribulations of dating apps and things like that. So I am very curious about how this situation is going to be handled, because my initial reaction on hearing the synopsis was, if I was dating someone and they said to me, I think we should go on a break because I think you need to do this. If I hadn't shown any interest in doing that, then I would be really annoyed. It does remind me a little bit of Queenie by Candice Carty-Williams, which I really enjoyed. I read it like 5 years ago now, but that also follows a main character who thinks that she's on a break from her boyfriend. However, as the reader, it becomes very clear very quickly that he's broken up with her. She is either just not willing to admit it, or he hasn't been clear with her. Queenie has a much more serious tone, and it really delves into the main character's mental health, and I'm not sure whether Experienced is going to do that. It has been compared to The Split by Laura Kay, which is a book that I think I gave 5 stars. Didn't have as much luck with Laura Kay's other books, but The Split I really enjoyed, so hopefully this is going to turn out to be a win. It is now Saturday afternoon. I have just got home from afternoon tea with my mum and my sister, and I wanted to pop in with a reading update because I had to do quite a lot of driving today, and I managed to get 30% of the way through Experienced by Kate Young. I am really enjoying this so far. The plot is pretty much exactly what I said, following this main character called Bet, and her girlfriend May turns around to her and says, I think we need to go on a break. So we're following Bet as she is navigating dating apps and just dating in general, and the interesting thing is Bet reminds me a lot of myself around 10 years ago. However, her friend Ash, she reminds me of me today because she is asking all of the questions that I would ask if a friend or my younger self came to me and said, here's the situation, I'm with someone who has asked if we can go on a break. I really like Ash. I think she is a great friend, and she is this voice of reason because Bet is going along with things. However, I think this is going to validate a lot of feelings that I have about situations like this. Obviously, there's always nuance to situations like this. I feel like May has ulterior motives for asking for this break. Let's just leave it at that. So, very much enjoying this. Yeah, I feel like that's all I really have to say about it so far. It's set in Bristol as well, which I love because I love Bristol. I wouldn't say that it's been funny, but there's been moments that have felt awkwardly realistic. I am quite an awkward person, and so I think that's why I'm relating quite a lot to this book. So this is going well so far. I will try and check in with you once I'm a little further in. I am planning on going for a run tomorrow, and I do like to listen to an audiobook when I go for a run. It was raining when I was on the way home earlier, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to go out this evening, but I'm hoping at some point this weekend I will be able to get to the halfway point. I have decided to start a new knitting project because I haven't made anything in over 18 months. I was in a craft shop with my mum and my sister at the weekend, and I felt inspired, so this is the book that I'm using. It's called Knitted Farm Animals. I have made something from this before, but I wanted to try out some of the other patterns. Annoyingly, I don't have that much colourful wool. For example, like ducks and chicks and stuff, which I thought would be cute for Easter, but I don't have the wool for that, and I don't have the wool for the pig either. So I decided to go for the llama, which is going to look something like that once it's done. I have loads of this colour wool that I need to use up. I never know what to use it for. So I've made the first half of the body so far, which doesn't look like anything, but once I've got another section, they both attach to the base like so, and then you make the head and the arms and stuff separately. The reason I wanted to start this project is so I had something to do while listening to audiobooks. Annoyingly though, I ran out of hours on my BookBeat account yesterday. Thankfully they do renew tomorrow, but it means I can't listen to anything through BookBeat anyway today, and I was going to go for a walk after work. I mean, I can still go for my walk, I just can't listen to an audiobook. Before I ran out of hours though, I did manage to get over halfway through Experienced, and I am really liking this so far. I don't know how I'm going to feel about the second half because I feel like I've reached a point where I would expect to be about 60 to 70% of the way through, so I have no idea what's going to happen in this second half. but I really like the characters. I feel really invested in the main character Bette and this journey that she's going on. I think sometimes with books like this, where they do focus on a main character's personal journey, the romance can feel kind of secondary. I've seen this compared to The Split by Laura Kay, and I think that's a fairly good comparison. However, with The Split, I can remember I gave it 5 stars because I really liked the main character's personal journey and there was a lot that I could relate to. However, I can't remember feeling anything towards the romance, and I think I had a similar opinion on Laura Kay's other books. With Experienced, I really like this friendship that's developing between the main character and this new friend that she's made since doing this challenge, and I think they have really natural chemistry. I think that it's a very believable, realistic romance, and I like that. It's still maintaining that British rom-com feeling. But yeah, the balance between the main character's personal journey and the romance feels good to me. So yeah, I'm glad this is going well because I picked it up having not really heard anyone talk about it. I mean, I must have done at some point, but I still can't remember who I heard talking about this book. I'm hoping to finish it within the next few days and then I will bring you a final update. But so far, this is giving strong 4-star feelings. Potentially could be a 4.5 or a 5, depending on how things wrap up. I have just finished filming another video and I remembered I needed to check in with you because I finished reading Experienced last night and I'm giving this 5 stars. This was so good. I feel like I need to better set expectations for this because while this is a romance, it does have a literary twist to it. So there's a couple of books that it reminded me of, not in terms of the characters or the plot. I think if you didn't like either of these books, you would still have a good chance of liking this book. But it reminded me of You Made a Fall of Death with Your Beauty by Akweke Emeze and You Again by Kate Goldbeck. I feel like those two books, when they came out, a lot of people weren't necessarily loving them because they do have a literary twist. And yeah, I just wanted to mention that to set expectations. As I said, the characters are very different. Experienced, it feels like a British rom-com, and I loved that. I loved the characters. What I especially liked was the friendships in this, how the main character's friends weren't afraid to call her out when she made mistakes. There are a few times where she slipped up and she said or did stuff that was a little bit, oh, you shouldn't have said that, and they said that to her, and I loved that representation of friendship. It isn't what I would call a spicy or smutty romance, however there are sex scenes. I felt like they were portrayed in a realistic way. One of my favourite books of the year so far. I'm so glad that I picked it up, and it still really annoys me that I can't remember where I first heard about this book, but anyway, would really recommend, especially if you are looking for something that feels like a British rom-com with a literary fiction twist. I have done another roll, so we are gonna skip to that now, and then I will pop back in and tell you what I'm going to be reading. Roll number 3 is 3. 1, 2, 3, which is Other. So we landed on Other, which means I need to read a book that's not a fantasy, thriller or romance. Basically a genre that is not on the board. And for this, I'm going with a sci-fi because I have The Ministry of Time by Callie-Anne Bradley on my April TBR already. I was really hoping I would be able to read it for this vlog. I haven't started this. I'm going to start it this afternoon once I finished editing, but this is set in our time, if not a little bit further into the future, and the government have come up with a way of doing time travel. Obviously I haven't started the book yet, so I don't know the details, but they can essentially bring people forward in time that would have died if they had been left in their time period. So our main character is someone who works for the government within this department, and she is tasked with looking after someone who has been brought forward as part of this experiment. I've heard it's a mix of a few different genres, and sometimes that works for me, sometimes it doesn't, but I'm very intrigued to see what I think of this because I have seen 1-star reviews and I have seen glowing 5-star reviews, and I love it when a book has those extreme ratings because it makes me think, okay, even if I don't love this, potentially I'm going to have some strong feelings about it, and I would rather that than just read a standard 3-star book. We'll let you know once I've started this. I am going to be reading this on my Kindle because I picked it up in a 99p Kindle deal at some point last year. So I have made a start on The Ministry of Time by Callie Bradley, and I don't know what to tell you about this book other than it's feeling like a 3 stars, which is not what I wanted. I'm really hoping that my feelings change in the second half. I'm about 40% of the way through, and yeah, so far it just feels fine. If anything, it feels very surface level, and it's not really going into depth on the things that I want it to focus on. You're basically told in the beginning that the British government have discovered time travel, and I don't care if we don't get an explanation around how the time travel works. It literally tells you, don't worry about it, just accept that this is a thing. But the British government want to know how time travel impacts the human body, physically and mentally. So our main character is having to observe this guy from the, I want to say 1800s. He was in the Navy and he was on this Arctic expedition before he was pulled forward into our time. If you were to think about this actually happening and the types of conversations that you would have with someone from the past, that is what we've got so far. Nothing further. Like, it's not really, in my opinion, that thought-provoking so far, because the conversations that have happened are kind of obvious. For example, the main character is having to explain to this guy that women have rights now and they're allowed to wear shorter skirts, and she's also had to explain to him that he can't use certain words anymore because they're racist. Even the discussions around technology, it's all stuff that I think is very surface level. I was expecting it to go a little bit deeper and it hasn't really done that. I feel like we've moved through this first part very quickly and it's become more about this relationship between the main character and this guy. Don't get me wrong, I do like them. I think they have an interesting dynamic. I am pretty confident that we're moving towards a romance, and that is a little bit weird. There's been times where she's thought about him in terms of she is watching a child grow up and learn how to adapt to this world. I don't know why that decision was made to kind of frame her mind like that. He has this dry, sarcastic sense of humour, which I do like. If anything, I think that if this had been more clearly a romance, then maybe I would be enjoying it more because my expectations would have been different. This, in my opinion, doesn't really feel like sci-fi. I'm hoping that this goes in a direction that I'm not expecting. There have been hints that stuff is going on in the background that our main character maybe doesn't know about. We do also get this timeline in the past where we're following this guy before he was brought forward into the future, and I like those chapters, but I think what I would really like is his perspective in the present day. I think that would be so much more interesting, like having his thoughts of experiencing our world rather than seeing our main character observe him, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'm gonna try and finish this at some point over the weekend. It's currently Thursday and I'm actually going away this evening for work. I'm coming back tomorrow, but I'm helping out with some filming tomorrow, so I'm going up this evening and then I'm driving back tomorrow afternoon, evening, so it's going to be a busy few days. I'm also getting my haircut on Saturday. I haven't had my haircut in nearly 6 months, or maybe it's more like 5 months, but I haven't had my haircut in a while, and that's why I've been wearing it up quite a lot, because it's just been annoying me, and that's when I know I need to get it done. So annoyingly, I've already filmed this update once and the sound has completely messed up. I don't know whether it's my microphone or whether it was the memory card that I was using, so I'm trying this again and fingers crossed it now works. There was this weird staticky noise in the background and I don't know what was going on there, but I have now finished The Ministry of Time by Callie Bradley, and I don't know how I feel about this book. Even now, it's been a few days. I didn't hate it, but also I didn't really like it. So it's somewhere between a 2 and a 3 stars. There was stuff that I liked, but I think I was mostly disappointed that this wasn't what I wanted it to be. I wanted this to focus on how time travel affected these expats, as they're called, and there were some moments, like there was one point where one of the expats is talking about how they feel this pressure or this responsibility to do something worthwhile with their life because they've essentially been given this second chance, and I wanted more moments like that, and it wasn't really about that. In fact, I don't really know what the point was of this book. It was trying to do so much. It felt a bit chaotic, and I can see that working for some people, but I ended up just feeling a bit underwhelmed because it was trying to do so much. It meant that it wasn't doing anything particularly well. I did like the found family vibe that it had going. All of these characters from the past are quite eccentric, and there were some interesting moments between them. Some of the humour I thought was quite funny, and some of the dialogue and the banter, I really liked that. I don't even know what genre I would call this, because it has time travel, but it's not really a sci-fi. It has a love story, but it's not really a romance. And towards the end, it started to feel like a thriller, which is when I think it completely lost me. It was fine. Like, I don't think it's gonna stick with me long term, and I don't know whether I would read other books by this author. This was a debut, so it depends if they publish anything else. I am going to be moving on to my next role. I have already started the book, so I'll insert the footage now and then I'll come back to you and tell you what I decided to choose. Role number 4 is a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is challenge. And the challenge is to read an arc or a book for a video project. Up until this point, all of the books that I've been reading for this vlog, I've been reading alongside a very large Malazan book. However, I finished that a few days ago, so going forward, all of the books that I'm going to be reading, they're going to be my main priority read, which is fun. For this next prompt, I decided to look on my NetGalley shelf and see what arcs I needed to prioritise, and I decided to go with Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent, because I love Carissa Broadbent, and even though this is set in the same world as the Crowns of Nyaxia series, it does work as a standalone, and I'm in the mood for some standalone fantasy romance. So I'm about 15 to 20% of the way through this and enjoying it so far. We're following a main character who is part of this religious organisation. Basically, in this world, there are various gods and humans worship these gods. Our main character worships this particular god who grants her followers the gift of sight. They deliberately blind themselves and it allows them to see the threads of the world, and they're essentially seers. At the start of the book, a group of vampires invade their land and our main character is chosen to infiltrate them. So it's an enemies to lovers story, and I am interested to see how the relationship develops, because Carissa Broadbent writes, usually, at least from my experience, she writes a slow burn really well. We'll give you some more information and some more thoughts once I'm a little further into this, but so far I am enjoying it. I've liked this setup. It's moved quite quickly, but also it's not focusing on the romance just yet. So I have reached the halfway point in Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, and I'm not enjoying this quite as much as the other Carissa Broadbent books that I've read. However, I think that's because Serpent in the Wings of Night was one of those all-encompassing 5-star books, and this isn't that, but I'm enjoying it for what it is. I think the main characters have decent chemistry and it's a slow burn, which is my preference. The only thing I'm a little bit confused about is the main character's actions don't seem to line up with her motivations and what she's there to do. So she is this assassin that's been sent by this religious organisation to infiltrate this group of vampires who are moving across their country, this human land, and they're conquering cities as they go. Her ultimate goal is to assassinate this guy, and some of her thoughts, like every so often she'll think about how she's there to kill him eventually, but her actions don't seem to be lining up, and it's a little bit confusing. I think that could have been done in a better way. I am liking them when they're on page together, and I like how they're fairly evenly matched. The main character is super capable. She, like I said, is an assassin and she has her own magical ability. I really like the way that the magic has been described and talked about. She can do this thing where she can see the threads of the world and she can walk along these threads and predict the future, and I think even potentially see into the past. It's really interesting the way that it's been done, and I like how this is contributing to the wider Crowns of Nyaxia world. It's on a completely different continent to the other books, but we're still following vampires and it's still mentioning this country that I'm familiar with, and yeah, I am enjoying this so far. The first half has gone well. It's moving at a really steady pace. I think if I continue at this pace, then I should finish it either tonight or tomorrow. My laptop sounds like it's about to take off, so apologies if you can hear that in the background. I think that was everything that I needed to say anyway. It's Easter weekend this weekend. Me and my partner are going into Birmingham on Saturday for some lunch slash dinner and drinks. There's this place that I've heard does Detroit style pizza, and we used to have a place close to us that did that type of deep dish pizza. However, it closed towards the end of last year, so I've been wanting to try this place in Birmingham for a while. I think it's a pop-up, so they only operate on, I think it's Wednesdays and Saturdays Saturdays. We're going on Saturday, so hopefully we can have some delicious pizza. We're going to pop into Waterstones probably while we're there. There's also another place that I've heard about that is like an arcade, which we might try out as well. So hopefully it's going to be nice weather. It hasn't been the best at the last couple of days, but hopefully it doesn't rain is the main thing. So over the weekend, I did end up finishing the Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent, and I really enjoyed this. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I thought it was a really well written and structured standalone fantasy romance. In my opinion, you don't have to have read the main books in the Crowns of Nyaxia series in order to read this. However, I think if you have read those other books, in the core books in this series, you get a lot more information about Nyaxia, the goddess of death who created the vampires. You are told stuff in this standalone, which isn't like spoilery or anything for the main series, but in this book you're told this is what Nyaxia went through and what happened to her, whereas in the main series it's more drawn out and it's more detailed, and I felt like it gave me a greater emotional connection to this situation with the gods. I really like how Carissa Broadbent has developed this world. You have all of these different gods and they each represent different elements. So for example, you have the goddess of faith, you have another god who is to do with agriculture. The main reason I remember that god is because that is the god that is focused on in the 6 Crimson Cranes novella that comes in between books 1 and 2 in the series. But yeah, I really like this world and I liked reading a standalone that is set within that world. Would recommend it. However, be aware that Carissa Broadbent's books, or at least this series that I've read so far, it does go there with the violence and the gore. It's a series about vampires, so if you're squeamish about anything to do with blood, then maybe give this one a miss. But 4 stars, and we are now going to move on to my next role, and I've already started the book, so I'm going to pop in and tell you what I'm going to be reading. I've just checked, and if we get a 6, then this will be the final roll. It's gone off the floor. Annoyingly, it actually landed on a 6 on the floor, but we're not going to count that, so rolling again, it's a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is romance. So we landed on romance, and this is going to be the final roll for this vlog because whatever I roll next, I'm going to escape the board, which is a little bit anticlimactic. I will insert the clip from when I did the final roll because I did it immediately after the last one, but we landed on romance, and for this I've decided to combine it with a magical readathon prompt. So I'm taking part in the magical readathon this month, which is hosted by G at Book Roast. One of the classes that I need to complete, the prompt for it is to pick a selection of books and read the first sentence, the first line of each book, and then choose what to read based on that first line. So I read the first line of several romance books that I have on my TBR. The book that I thought I was going to want to read is Part Your World by Abby Jimenez. I think I might have even mentioned this as a potential when I did my TBR video. The first line of this is actually really dull. I wrote it down, so let me just find that. Moths fluttered in my headlights over the long grass of the ditch, which, yeah, that's a beautiful sentence, but it doesn't really intrigue me to continue reading the book. So in the spirit of being true to this prompt, I decided to go for the book that actually intrigued me based on the first sentence. So I'm reading a book that was not like on my immediate radar, but it is a sequel that I've been meaning to get to for a while. So the book that I decided to pick up is Apprentice to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayra. The first sentence of this is, once upon a time time. It was an ordinary day for the villain, aside from his body being on fire. And something about that first sentence just reminded me of how much I enjoyed the first book in the series. And I know that's a little bit of an unpopular opinion on BookTube. This book got really popular thanks to TikTok. However, most of the people that I've seen on BookTube reading it don't like it. And I understand, because it's quite a humorous book, and humour is something that's really subjective. I really like the humour in this. I find it really funny. It has that kind of dry, sarcastic humour, and I feel like this book is so unserious. It's literally the most fun, silly time, and it just makes me happy, okay? It puts a big smile on my face. The world building is basically non-existent, and that's a criticism that I've seen. I think that your enjoyment of this book and this series is going to be based on your expectations, because it's marketed as a romantasy, but I think more accurately I would describe it as a cozy fantasy with romance. If you go into it expecting something that's cozier and where there's not really an emphasis on the world building, it's set in this very generic medieval fantasy world, and it relies on you knowing fantasy creatures. This is going to sound really strange, but bear with me on this. It reminds me a little bit of Shrek. If you think of the movie Shrek, that is set in like this generic fairy tale medieval world, and it pokes fun at itself for that. And I feel like this book is doing something similar. Like, it's not meant to be serious, and I like that. So yeah, I've started the second book already, which is Apprentice to the Villain. Just in case I forgot to mention, the first book in the series is Assistant to the Villain. I'm about 40% of the way through, and unfortunately I'm not enjoying this as much as book one. It might be because I've taken about a 6-month gap in between reading book one and book two. The plot feels very chaotic and all over the place, but I still really like the characters. In this, we are following a main character called Evie, who at the start of book one, she accepts a job working for the villain of this world. He is kind of like a stereotypical caricature of a villain, and Evie is like the embodiment of the sunshine heroine trope, whereas he is grumpy. And just their dynamic and this slow building tension between them, because, you know, it is a romance, I find it really fun, even though I fully accept it's not the best written, okay? The writing, the prose, it's not the best. I'm going to try and finish this at some point in the next few days. According to my Kindle, at my current reading speed, I should finish it in about 4.5 hours, but I was very distracted yesterday when I was reading this book, so I might end up finishing it a little bit sooner. I have almost finished my llama as well. I've just got one more of his arms to do, and then he'll be finished. Oh, I've also got the tail to do. He doesn't look very much like the photo. I think I've stuck his arm on wrong, so I might need to put some stitches to stick it down, otherwise it just looks a little bit weird. But yeah, really happy with how he's looking so far. Look at his little face. He looks a little bit more like a sheep than a llama, but I think that's just the type of wool that I've used because I didn't have this colour. I went with a slightly lighter cream because that's just what I had available. So it is almost time to wrap up this vlog, because I have now finished Apprentice to the Villain, and I didn't like this as much as the first book. I'm going to give it 3 stars because it was fine. However, the reason I loved the first book was because of the dynamic between the villain and Evie. It felt like a workplace romance set within a fairy tale fantasy world, and there were these really awkwardly funny moments, which the second book did have. There were a few moments where I laughed out loud or where I was giggling and smiling to myself, so it wasn't like I hated this sequel. I just thought that the plot felt very directionless. I was so confused and lost in the beginning because it just launches you straight into the story. It doesn't do any recapping, so if you are interested in this series and you enjoy the first book, would recommend going into the second book quite quickly. I'm probably going to read the final book. If it's going to be longer than 3 books, then I don't think I'm interested, because it's just, this series should not be a series in my opinion. It should have been a really good standalone, but anyway, enough rambling because this vlog already feels like it's been going on for too long. I have been filming this vlog for about a month, so I have no idea what I said at the beginning of this vlog, but we have finally completed the TBR game. We have escaped the board, and it took 5 rolls this time, which I feel like that's kind of average for my TBR game. So thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye!